Okay, so to have a good debate, it takes more than yelling. I mean, sometimes when I watch debates on TV or um, online, it seems like there's more yelling and things other than logic going on. And actually, that does underlie how some people approach their debating strategy. The the organization of your debate is generally going to involve four elements, five if you count the question. So one, you have to have a good question that, by good, I mean one that people can take sides on logically and not and espouse for or oppose with vigor, and not feel like they're conflicted about their views. So generally, you need a good question. You need a person or a team to be the proponent of that question. And then you need someone to contradict that, and either to explain why whatever is being proposed, whatever answer that the proponent is coming up with is not the best one, or perhaps that there is a whole different alternative that might be better. And then to make it interesting, we need to have some judges in the audience. So a good debate, particularly with a group of this size, everyone's going to have a role while the debate is going on. So that's part of what makes it interesting, and part of it what also adds the other elements to understanding the judgment of the debate. And it's why it's very difficult for artificial intelligence to be the judge, because humans include things that aren't necessarily straight logic in making their judgments. Now let's look at the tactics or strategy. So there's our moderator, our proponent, our con, and finally our judges. These, just so you know, these are little figures that I picked out of icon, insert icon. If you go in, and you'll find little figures that are engaged in different things that you can incorporate in your presentation. Okay. A good debate generally follows some type of order. It's not just everybody shouting and seeing who can shout the loudest or who can intimidate the other person. This is where the moderator comes in. The moderator directs what's going on, and starts by asking the proponent to make a statement about the reasons for their position. And then they give the counter argument an opportunity to explain why that proposal is not the best approach. And then the proponent comes back and critiques the counter. Okay, you said this, but this is actually true, or this is not true, or you misunderstood this. And then the other guys get to come back and critique the other team. And then finally, you have a conclusion by both teams, and then you have an evaluation. And generally, when it's a structured or a planned debate, there's a team, and ideally, there's 2 or 3 people on each side, and you're able to divide up your job and do the research in advance, so that each of you is focusing on dealing with a certain position. So if you were doing this long term, if you were going into competitive debating, a team of 3 with one person who's really prepared to state the case, another person who's prepared to critique alternatives to the case, and another person to give a good, strong conclusion, gets you a good result. I had the opportunity while I was in the Philippines to act as a judge for a couple of debates, and the students at my university would stand up and debate each side of it, and we would try and reach a conclusion as to who was the winner of the debate, who made the best overall presentations, and so on. So it's kind of an interesting intellectual activity, but it's also kind of an interesting, entertaining, almost sport. The Greeks, who had thought about almost everything, basically there's not too much that the Greeks missed. They were all talking about atoms and the sun and everything. Pretty much a lot of the things that we're discussing now, maybe somewhat more limited technology available to them, but their minds could go out there and look at a lot of different things. When they look at debate, and they saw, and we continue to see, 4 basic strategies that can be used. And the same teams may use both strategies or all 4 strategies in the course of their debate. And the first is called logos, and basically that's the one that I like. That's the logic. You lay out, these are the cost and the benefits, and this is how we would do it, and this is why we would do it. And obviously the position I'm taking makes a lot of sense. And if I present it with true facts and true studies, then that's a good logical way to try to win my argument. But there's 3 other ways of going at it, and one of those is ethos. And you might do this if you're like a very religious person or a very political person, or you're committed to a certain ideology, rather than appealing largely to facts, particularly if your audience has views that favor a particular religion, let's say, or favor a particular national view. You might argue not so much that this is right because of the facts, but this is right because this is right. This is what's already been decided to be true, and that if my ethics says that you don't do this or that you do this, then that is a stronger reason for doing it than the pure rational facts might be. Stripped down negatively or nakedly like that, ethos doesn't sound like that good of an approach, but it's really how a lot of us think about a lot of things. We don't necessarily think about, well, what are the facts of this? What's the pros and the cons? How do I weigh these? We go, what's right? And I read down the 10 Commandments, and I see each of those things. And if it says you don't do this, well, you don't do it. There's no basis for discussing that otherwise. Or maybe it's a tradition where I live, or that we do things in a certain way. Americans, if American is walking down the street, they tend to walk on the right-hand side of the sidewalk and pass one another that way. If a Brit is walking down the street, they tend to walk on the left-hand side and pass one another that way. Which is better? Which is right and wrong? Really kind of hard to say, but by the traditions of that culture, that's the way you do things. So in some situations, that can be a compelling argument. What else can we do? Well, we can go and do what advertisers do. We can do what political people do, and that is appeal to people's non-rational views, appeal to their emotions, get them upset or get them happy or get them envious or repel them by showing something about the other side that makes them think negatively or make them mad. Each of these things is not, strictly speaking, a very rational approach. Sometimes they may grow out of rational information, but they're our mind's way of reacting in a more general way, so that when I'm making a presentation, I may be going down the list and presenting the thing and getting the information out, but I could be enjoying it. My students could be enjoying it, or they could be bored by the presentation, but they're still writing down the notes and they're still taking them down. So if I'm a teacher, I actually want to motivate my students to be, if not happy, at least interested in what we're discussing. And that's something that goes a little beyond pure logic. So there's something to be said for pathos. And then finally, there's this approach. And we have an expression in English, and you may have something similar in Ukrainian, that timing is everything. Americans have an interest in time, but this some of it has to do with timing on a clock, but some of it has to do with when you bring up something. You know, if you come to me and say, let's go to lunch, if you ask me after I've just had breakfast, I might say, no, I don't think so. But if you ask me at noon and I haven't had anything to eat in quite a while, I might say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Well, debating can be the same way. If you present a topic, present a solution, the reaction of your audience may be different depending on where they are, maybe in their careers, maybe in the day, maybe in their studies. And that is a factor that can make a difference in whether they decide that they're going to agree with you or not. So 4 basic strategies. I think generally speaking, debaters tend to move towards one direction or another, but most debaters use all 4 to some extent. And then there's tactics. And tactics are the here and now things that you do. Strategies, the big umbrella to what's going on. It's what the generals do. Tactics are what the sergeants do. It's what you do to deal with specific issues. And some of these are, well, they're not particularly pretty, and yet we see them all the time. Sometimes when people are arguing, particularly politicians, particularly people with a political view, they may engage in something that is called the ad hominem approach, which is basically to attack the man, to attack the person rather than the idea. And here, these are a couple of characters that I think you probably are familiar with from American cartoons. But the lady on the right is Lucy, and Lucy's telling Linus that that can't be true because you're an idiot. Now, the fact that Linus is or is not an idiot really doesn't have much to do with whether something is true or it's not true. But in a debate, in an argument, sometimes this is how people argue. This guy can't be right. He's too fat, or his hair is the wrong color, or I don't like his looks. Things that have nothing whatsoever to do with the actual debate may be tactics that people use. Now, the main thing that you need to know about this is pretty much what you don't want to be doing. This is what the advertising and politicians and people that none of us like do all the time. They take a totally non-rational approach, a personalized approach, and it's not a rare thing in American politics, at least. It's very common to attack your opponent based on these totally non-rational things because people respond to that. So there's the question of, do I want to win on logic, or do I want to win on these emotional tactics that get people on my side or get people against the other person? That's where this type of tactic comes in. It's designed to get an emotional response. Here's another approach that's not too different, but basically, instead of necessarily attacking the person, you may attack something about the person or something about their side, excuse me, that that has nothing to do, again, with the rational argument. And Lucy's saying, this can't be true. Your uncle's too tall. Well, what Linus's uncle's being tall or short or in between has to do with any argument that I can think of. I don't know. And yet Lucy's using this tactic. This is a tactic that people do use, again, all the time. They use it so often that we don't generally notice it when it's going on, but you will see it in advertising, in short things online and on TV, where they're trying to move you in a certain direction, and they make what I would regard as an unworthy attack on their opponent, and rather than attack, what their person is doing or what they're proposing, they attack the person, or they attack people around the person, or something in the person's background that the person has no control over, and that has nothing to do with what's going on. So this is an important tactic. Keep your eyes open. You're going to see it taking place. But it is, of course, not one that I would recommend. And then this one's also quite common. This is one that kids like to do, and that's the distracting question. Someone's trying to present something. They're trying to communicate some information, and someone else will come in and ask a question that has nothing to do with the overall discussion, that moves the discussion in a different direction, that's basically non-productive for what you're trying to accomplish in the period of time that the debate's going on. But this, again, is something, particularly again in politics, that you will see people doing all the time. The main thing you need to know about it is not to use it, but to be aware when you see it happening, that someone is attacking a person rather than their argument, or they're attacking the person's background, or something that has nothing to do with the argument whatsoever, or perhaps they're just trying to move people away from arguing about what's important and move them towards arguing or talking about something that's totally different. Does this sound like the wrong thing to do? I think so. Is it what happens a lot? Yes, it does.